Alright. Okay, what's up, guys? This is, well, well, in case you can't tell, this is the account formerly known as Rockwarrior97, but, you can just call me David here, and this is a response to Travis, Josh, and Zach from MonsterFTStudio on their top 20 albums from the 1990s list. And so I was inspired by their video to rank my own top 20 albums list. And first off, before I get to the list, I'd just like to apologize if the sound quality of this video really sucks. I don't really have any microphones with me or anything. I'm just recording it through my computer speakers right now. So if the sound quality sucks, I apologize in advance. But before we get to the top 20 albums in the 90s list for me, I'd just like to do a really quick rundown of 5 albums that are honorable mentions on this list, and a brief discussion as to why they didn't make the cut. Okay, honorable mention number 1, the Stone Temple Pilots, Purple. I like the Stone Temple Pilots a lot. When it comes to mainstream rock during the 1990s, it didn't really get better than them. Their albums, on the other hand, in my opinion, tend to suffer from inconsistency in that sometimes they would be really good, like Purple, like I said, which is why it's not mentioned here, is pretty damn all-around excellent. It's got tracks like the hits like Big Empty, Interstate Love Song, which is really one of the best songs to drive around on the highway to. Unglued is good. Pretty Penny's really catchy. You won't be able to get out of your head. There's another one there that I really like. I'm trying to think, wasn't there another? Oh, Vaseline. How can I forget Vaseline? The hidden track, the second album, just out of all their studio albums, Purple is probably their most consistently good. Though I also have a soft spot for tiny music. But Purple went out just because I think it's slightly better. And however, it doesn't make the list because, like I've said, as much as I like the STP's albums, and although Purple is the best of them, there are a couple songs there that I think that are a little... I hate using the term filler for this album, but I guess that's the best way to call it. I mean, Army Ants, well, not a bad song, isn't a very memorable one for me. And, what is it, Silverman Superman? That song is a good chorus, but the rest I don't remember much about. Which is why it's not in my top 20 list. But still, it's so damn good, it deserves at least an honorable mention. Honorable mention number 2, Pearl Jam, 10. This album is on almost everybody's best in the 90s list, and it's pretty easy to see why. I mean, it's the biggest selling album of the grunge era, at least here in North America anyway, with over 13 million copies sold. And you know what the weird thing is? Even though it's the biggest selling album of the grunge era, if my memory serves me correctly, because when I looked this album up, it only hit number 2 in America, because Billy Ray Cyrus's album, whatever the hell the name of it was, the one that had Achy Breaky Heart, actually prevented it from hitting number 1. Yet another crime that Billy Ray has wrought upon humanity. But nevertheless, 10 is obviously Pearl Jam's best album. I mean, at least it's their biggest seller. And it's the album of theirs that I find myself playing the most, although I do have a soft spot for its 2 follow-ups, Versus and Vitology. However, I don't have 10 on my top 20 best list, because as much as I like it, I just don't like as much as the other albums I have on the top 20. That and plus, I've always thought Pearl Jam was kind of overrated personally, but I'll save that for a completely another discussion or whatnot. Again, I still like Pearl Jam. Like I said, their first 3 albums I enjoy a lot, but afterwards it becomes a whole lot of mostly mediocrity for them, in my opinion. But again, that's another discussion for another time. Let's move on to the next couple honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 3, Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 2. I love both Use Your Illusion albums. However, I had to choose 2 over 1 because of the fact that as much as I like Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, I prefer 2 slightly because it has a bit more grand, epic feel to it, as well as the fact that Use Your Illusion 1 had a ton of, oh yeah, fuck you type songs that I don't mind, but after a while it kind of gets old a little. After a little while. And I mean, I know a lot of heavy metal is like that too, obviously, but Guns N' Roses is more of like the traditional hard rock group than more heavy metal. And on Use Your Illusion 1, like I said, even though I admit both Use Your Illusion albums do have some filler, I admire them for their grand scheme of things and how epic they try to make them, and they're both pretty solid. And that's why I prefer 2 over 1. However, 2 doesn't make the cut just because, again, as much as I like it, I just don't like it as much as these other albums. Honorable mention number 4. Korn, self-titled debut. Korn is a band that really gives me mixed feelings. On one hand, I do like some of their stuff. I mean, everybody likes Freak on a Leash. There's a couple songs in their second album, Life is Peachy, that I like. But for all of Korn's albums, I'd say their debut is probably their most consistently good. Even if there are a couple tracks on there that I have to kind of laugh at and how Jonathan Davis sings. But then there's some tracks in there like, I think it's called Lies, that features, I believe it's Jonathan Davis and Head singing lead at one part on the chorus that I really like. I like the semi-creepy, semi-funny hidden track at the end of the last song, Daddy, which really deserves a worthy mention because Korn never, ever plays that song live anymore. Because the fact that, well, for starters, the song's about how Jonathan Davis, the lead singer, was molested as a kid, and how nobody believed him that he got molested at the time. And towards the end, you literally just hear him break down and crying. And that alone deserves worthy mention. And as much as I like Korn, I've always had a hard time truly embracing them, just because of the fact that there are some moments where I don't mind the sort of, beatboxing histrionics of Jonathan Davis, where it's like, like sometimes I don't mind that, but then because there's some moments where it truly does fit the music and the beat they're going for, but then there's some other moments they have with it that just make me want to laugh and completely kills the previous seriousness of the album. Which is why Korn's not in my top 10 favorite bands list, nor is their debut album, as good as it is, make my top 20 favorite albums of the 90s. And my fifth and final honorable mention of my top 20 favorite albums of the 90s goes to, oddly enough, Marilyn Manson, Mechanical Animals. I've never been a huge Manson fan, but I can't deny the fact that he does have a couple albums I do enjoy, or at least a few songs I enjoy. But even though his most famous album may be Antichrist Superstar, I've always had a soft spot for Mechanical Animals, even if the concept is him ripping off David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust era. But Mechanical Animals I always liked because the album's one of those albums that every song on the album, or almost every song on the album, is catchy as hell. And even if you don't like it, like, I can't stand the track User Friendly, but that song will be stuck in my head after I'm done playing the whole album. Like, I played the whole album on a car trip once, a couple of months ago, and for the rest of the day I had that entire album stuck in my head. True story. However, as good as the album is, I can't place it on my top 20 favorite list just because, well, again, never been that much of a Manson fan enough, but I can at least give this album an honorable mention because, well, it, for the most part anyway, deserves it. Oh, and before anybody else mentions it in the comments section, no, there will not be any Nirvana on this list. Why, you may ask? Well, I like Nirvana, I really do, and I'm glad that they're going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. However, I was never crazy about their debut album, Bleach. Not that it was bad, but there were so many songs I felt that could have been better if it had better production on it. Like, there's some songs I think that get a little too sludgy, and that kind of just buries the song in the mix when it should shine. However, in the case of Nirvana's Nevermind, that album had way too much polish and whatnot. It sounds way too clean, with very little, if any, edges. Like, all the edges were sanded off. And while I like In Utero as well, like I said, I like all three of the albums they did when they were together. In Utero is good, but it's one of those albums that I'll go through weird phases, in that sometimes I play it and I'll like it a lot, other times I'll play it and I'll hate it. No, I can't say I'll hate it, that's too strong a word. So just sometimes I'll play it and I'll like it, other times I'll play it and I won't like it, or feel that something's missing from it. And if I were to make my top favorite albums list and I had to include Nirvana in it, I would pick my favorite Nirvana album, Live at Reading. However, Live at Reading didn't come out until 2009, despite the fact that it was recorded way back in 1992. However, because it wasn't released during the 90s, it does not have a place on this list. So, sorry Nirvana fans, but there will be no Nirvana albums on this list. Now, finally, without further ado, on to my top 20 favorite albums of the 1990s. Number 20, Slipknot, Self-Titled. I know a lot of people can probably be raging right now, the fact that I have a Slipknot album, my top 20 favorite albums in the 90s, but If I had to pick one Slipknot album that I would, like, listen to for the rest of my life, it'd be their self-titled debut. I mean, I like Iowa, their second album that came out in 2001. That album's nice and strong, and Volume 3, which came out in 2004, that one gives me mixed feelings. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. All Hope Is Gone, I couldn't stand. I mean, if Volume 3 was the album they started adding more melody to their music, if anything, it was Rick Rubin that helped make that album, in my opinion, because there are some songs in Volume 3 that get so melodramatic in contrast to the heaviness of their other songs, like The Blister Exists or something like that. But, thanks to Rick Rubin's production, he prevents these melancholy, more melodramatic, softer stuff from going off the rails too much. And because the rest of the band didn't like working with Rubin, they didn't bring him back for All Hope Is Gone, which by that point in time, there's stuff like Dead Memories, which is a pretty nice melodic song, but then there's stuff like Gematria, the Killing Name, that's insanely metal, and for all the flack that Metallica gets for getting much softer on their albums like Load and Reload, at least they kept their softest material on separate albums. Like, can you imagine a tune like Mama Said off of Load on the Black Album? Sound pretty weird, wouldn't it? Pretty much that's why I don't like All Hope Is Gone, because it's so all over the place and not in a good way. It's like they want to be heavy as hell for the heavy metal songs, and then when it comes to the softer stuff, it's like they want to get all melodramatic and stuff, and it doesn't quite work that way, at least not the way they're trying to make it. And that's why I don't like All Hope Is Gone. But again, back to the point here, because I'm going off on a tangent again. Slipknot's self-titled album is my favorite, just because it's creepy, it's energetic, some melodic songs still have a heaviness edge to it, and there might be a couple melodramatic moments, but it's not like any of those, oh, woe is me moments like tracks like Dead Memories seem to have, or Snuff. Blech. But nevertheless, I like Slipknot's self-titled album a lot. Although, if anyone's out there looking to find a copy, I would recommend you buy the copy that doesn't have the logo on the top. Because there's two different editions of it, not counting the 10th anniversary one. The more common edition is the one that just says Slipknot on the top of the album cover. But if you can, try and track down the very first original pressing. It doesn't say the word Slipknot on the cover, because the original pressing had two tracks, Frail Limb Nursery and Purity, that weren't on the re-release of the album, which is much more common, because both those songs were taken off and as the album had to be re-released because of the fact that there was a lawsuit involving said song, because it turns out the lead singer based the song off what he thought was a true story, but it turns out it wasn't, and as a result, they were forced to take the song, as well as Frail Limb Nursery, which is the intro to Purity, off of the album, and instead replaced with another track called Me Inside that isn't that great. It's not bad, it's just not that great. So, again, recommend if you can track down the very first original pressing of Slipknot. Okay, moving on. Number 19, 9 Inch Nails' The Fragile. The Fragile was my favorite 9 Inch Nails album. And 9 Inch Nails are one of those bands that, again, they might be a little too melodramatic at times, especially in their lyrics. But I've always enjoyed their music for the most part. And The Fragile contains probably, in my opinion, some of the best music of 9 Inch Nails' entire career, or for that matter, Trent Reznor's anyway. Admittedly, the lyrics in The Fragile probably could have and should have been better. Even Trent Reznor's admitted that in concert footage. Like, there was, I don't know if he said this during a concert or during an interview, but I remember hearing it one time. He mentioned that he admitted that The Fragile isn't the easiest album for him to listen to, because this is the album where he got really shit-faced on drugs and alcohol, or whatever the hell he was doing, and even attempting to kill himself at one point, he said. But, and he said that's why there were so few lyrics on this album, because I'm trying to think, like, half the album's lyrics, half the album's instrumental, and even most of the songs that do have lyrics tend to have long instrumental passages in there, and still, at least, it all sounds really good. And that's pretty much why I like it, I guess. That, and plus the track We're In This Together, is probably one of my top 25 favorite songs ever. I mean, when I heard that song used in the previews to the Avengers movie when it came out 2 years ago, oh man, I marked out. That's like the ultimate song for any epic battle, where it's like a group of friends against, like, the whole world falling apart as the world ends, and the group of friends is like, we're not taking shit from nobody anymore. That's like the song to play. It's just so epic and grand. I love it. Anyway, number 18, U2, Zooropa. This album never gets any love. I mean, U2's 80s period gets talked about to death by magazines like Rolling Stone and whatnot, and how, oh, they had the Joshua Tree, they had War, which is a really overrated album in my opinion, The Unforgettable Fire, and then they go to the 90s period, and all anybody mentions in their 90s period is Achtung Baby. Now, Achtung Baby is a damn good album. Damn good. But Zooropa is my favorite, because Zooropa is another album where U2 tried experimenting a bit more, and for the most part, it's really not much of an arena rock type album like a lot of U2's albums tend to be. Like, their albums is sort of like the majestic arena rock about, like, you know, life and whatnot, and doing, like, the right thing and all that stuff. But Zooropa is sort of like a quiet, futuristic pop album, but in a good way. I mean, the album starts off with the anthemic Zooropa track, which I remember when they finally started playing it live again in 2011. They actually made, like, the Yahoo front page because it was such a big deal that they were finally starting to play stuff from the 90s again. Apart from stuff from Achtung Baby. Yeah, I like the title track, Zooropa. It's a pretty good, like, it's probably one of the few songs that U2 did where it takes their anthemic approach to music and added, like, a futuristic slant to it, which is definitely helped by the fact that I think Brian Eno produced a lot of this album. I think. I might be wrong. And there's another track in there called Numb that's so bizarre I like it. The whole song's like this bizarre spoken word drone with this really cool sounding guitar part. And it's one of those artsy tunes that I just love. Then there's Lemon, which is like a futuristic disco track that I enjoy as well. Even if it might tend to overstay its welcome, like the song goes on for 7 minutes or something crazy. I like Daddy's Gonna Pay for Your Crash Car. It's sort of like U2's attempt at going industrial, and it's not that embarrassing. And, the final song on the album is The Wanderer and features Johnny Cash guest singing. It's a pretty solid album, and admittedly U2 haven't played a lot of its songs live in concert anymore because of the fact that they mentioned, I think, in an interview that when they were touring the album in 1993, that a lot of songs of the album were really hard to play live because of their production or whatever instruments they used on the tracks. So after they finished touring for it in 93, 94-ish, they stopped playing the songs live for a very, very, very long time. Like, it wasn't until 2011 they started playing songs of this album live in concert again. But I'm glad they finally started acknowledging that this album exists because it's damn good. Pardon me. Number 17. Oasis. What's the Story, Morning Glory. Definitely Oasis's best album and arguably the best Britpop album. I like Blur a lot, but I prefer Oasis slightly over Blur. And although I like the other albums Oasis did during the 90s, like Be Here Now and definitely maybe Morning Glory is my favorite. And, well, the only track on Morning Glory I don't like is, I think it's Hey Now, and it's just because I think that's a song that overstays its welcome. But the rest of the material on the album is pretty damn good. I mean, you got Champagne Supernova, Wonderwall, pardon me, what else is on there? Cast No Shadow is one of my favorites. That's one of the songs that wasn't a hit, but I love. Hello is okay. Well, actually, Hello is pretty good. Roll With It is so-so. But, like I said, it's a very consistently good album, and it's one of those albums that deserves to be hit and was. I just like it. It's solid and it's good. No more needs to be said. Number 16, Sublime, self-titled. Definitely my favorite Sublime album. I've always enjoyed Sublime. I like all three of the albums the band released when they were together. I haven't heard any of their newer stuff with Rome Ramirez as their lead singer, but 40 Ounces to Freedom is good. Robin the Hood is one of their weirder albums, and probably one of the weirdest albums to be successful during the 90s. But it's still very good, but Sublime's self-titled album is by far my favorite. I mean, it's the most consistently song-oriented, like, none of the songs really tend to meander, and when they do, they sound like really epic jams. Someone like Pawn Shop, was it Get Ready? I think it might be Get Ready. That was sort of like a big party song. I just love the sound of Sublime. Like, it's got that Southern California 90s sound that just sounds wonderful. Like, it's almost like a big party of fun. And it's just a damn shame that Brad Nowell died before this album came out. I mean, it really sucks because, in my opinion, if you listen to the 3 Sublime albums, it's like, with every album, his songwriting would improve. And although I don't think Sublime's self-titled album is perfect, I do believe it's still pretty damn good. And like I said, if he had just stayed alive to make a couple more albums, I truly think he would have created like the perfect Sublime record. And sadly, because of his death, we'll never get to hear it. Still, Sublime is so damn good, it's definitely worth a purchase and listen. Number 15, Soundgarden, Super Unknown. Okay, it might be heresy to some that I include a list that has a Soundgarden album on it, but no Nirvana and no Pearl Jam albums on the actual top 20 list. Well, I really like Super Unknown. It's a long, epic, heavy metal album styled after Led Zeppelin, and it's just a solid album. I know a lot of people may prefer Bad Motorfinger or Down on the Upside, and no problem with that. It's just that I've only heard Bad Motorfinger once or twice, and I've never heard Down on the Upside. And still, what I hear from Super Unknown, I enjoy a lot. I mean, almost every song on the album is solid. There's Let Me Drown, which is a hell of an opener. My Wave is a really cool song, too. I like the ending. On Black Days, I love. Mailman's okay. The title song is great. Head Down is a trippy-ass song. I mean, I used to hate that song when I first heard it, but it's grown on me a lot. And I remember one time I actually had that song playing on my headphones when I was falling asleep. That was a trippy experience without any drugs required. Let me tell you that. Black Hole Sun is obviously their biggest hit. Good song, but I'm tired of hearing it. Spoon Man, I just love how that song sounds. Well, actually, I take that back. The only problem I have with Spoon Man is I wish the song had, like, a bit more of an edge to it. Like, I think the song's a little too polished. Like, I wish the drums had more oomph to them, I guess I could say, for lack of a better term. And that the song would be slightly rawer. Because to me, it's a little too galvanized, I guess you could say. But apart from that, Spoon Man just might be my favorite Soundgarden song in general, just because I love the drum groove on there. Like I said, and that's only half of the Super Unknown album. I mean, the entire album is so damn good. I mean, it's Soundgarden's only #1 album, their biggest seller. So, check it out. That's really all I gotta say. Number 14, Radiohead, OK Computer. It's really tough to figure out what my favorite Radiohead album is. It's almost always like a 3-way tie between The Bends, Kid A, and OK Computer. Eventually, OK Computer won out, but damn it, it was a hard choice. OK Computer is pretty much that one album that you always hear about in rock music magazines like Rolling Stone and Pitchfork and all that crap. But OK Computer really is a solid album. I mean, Airbag's a decent opener, Paranoid Android's good, Submarine Homesick Alien is good, Exit Music for a Film is really creepy and catchy, especially towards the end. Let Down's one of my favorite Radiohead songs. Karma Police is good. Fit or Happier is that one song you're not sure if it's supposed to be funny or creepy, even if it's only 2 minutes long. Electioneering, I really like that song. One of the few guitar-driven tracks in the album. There's Climb Up the Walls, which I just love how like dark and epic the song sounds, and that the whole end of the song just sounds like it's collapsing in on itself. No Surprises is great. Lucky is that one song that has that real Pink Floyd vibe that I love. And The Tourist is just like great, almost cinematic type of ending to the album. It may not be a real happy record, but damn it, it's awesome. The production is great, the songwriting is great. It's just wonderful. Definitely one of Radiohead's finest, if not their #1 all-time finest moments. Number 13, System of a Down, self-titled. The only album System of a Down ever released during the 1990s, and I'll admit, out of all of System of a Down's albums, this was the last one that I heard. And it also was the one that took me the longest to really get into. Because compared to most of their later releases, this album's definitely a lot rawer and heavier to it. And it's also definitely by far the most politically oriented album. I mean, all their albums are politically oriented, but this is the one album that takes that and just really drives it home. I mean, almost every song in here is like written for political issues, whether it be drugs or conspiracy theories or revolution and all that stuff. It's just a really solid album. Solid songwriting, solid performances. The only album they did that bettered it, in my opinion, was Toxicity, but because that came out in 2001, their self-titled debut gets the nod here. Number 12, Beck, Mutations. This is a Beck album that I think deserves more attention than it gets. This was during the time when Beck was signed to the DGC record company, and at the time he had this weird clause in his contract that allowed him to record albums for DGC records, while at the same time being able to record an album for whatever independent label he chose. This allowed him to create Mellow Gold in 1994, as well as Stereopathetic Soul Manure under the Flipside record label, followed by One Foot in the Grave around 1995, I think. Then he released under the major label for Odelay. However, Odelay sort of became a runaway success, proving that his big hit Loser, which came from Mellow Gold, wasn't just a one-hit wonder or a fluke hit. And when Odelay became a surprise success, the record label wanted Beck to hurry up and release his follow-up to it. However, 2 years later, after Odelay's release, he released an album that was supposed to be for the independent label Ball & Load Records, which turned out to be Mutations. However, the DGC record label bought out the rights to Mutations from Ball & Load and chose to release it under their label, which I believe resulted in a brief lawsuit that pretty much prevented Beck from recording from any independent labels during the remainder of his Geffen record deal. Nevertheless, Mutations is a very good album. And in contrast to Odelay, which was like a very upbeat dance party record with a ton of sampling and whatnot, Mutations is more of like a 1960s, it almost has like a 1960s type feel to it. I mean, it's a very mellow record for the most part. Like it starts off with Cold Brains, which is, I guess, sort of a bizarro, folky, almost country tune. But unlike what you come to expect from country music, there's really no fiddles or steel guitars or any electric guitars for that matter on that album, on that song. And there's Nobody's Fault But My Own, which is dominated by a pretty cool sitar arrangement. Then there's Tropicalia, which is a bossa nova track that I've actually heard in a few department stores. And even at one point I heard it on some talk show on the radio once, which was a nice surprise. And there's also a hidden track on the album called Diamond Bollocks. That's one of the few songs on the album that uses an electric guitar. And I think that's sort of like his tribute to Jimi Hendrix, I guess, in a way. It's got a very heavy psychedelic feel to it. And I just love Mutations. Mutations is a very solid album. It's very mellow, but the songwriting's very strong. It's funny. It's just a solid album that I think deserves more attention than it gets. Like, you never hear about this album when it comes to Beck. You always hear about Sea Change, or Mellow Gold, or Odelay, or Guero, but you never hear about this album, which I think is a shame. Number 11, Primus, Pork Soda. This is a very difficult choice for me to make, because most of Primus's albums are all pretty damn good. But eventually it came out to either Sailing the Seas of Cheese or Pork Soda. Ultimately, Pork Soda won out, but only just barely. I like Sailing the Seas of Cheese, but I like Pork Soda just because I like the songs on it more. I like My Name is Mud. I love that bass and drum. I don't want to call it a groove. It's not much of a groove. It's sort of like the bass riff repeated over and over again, playing in unison with the drums. I just love how that sounds. Welcome to This World's one of my all-time favorite songs. You know, welcome to this world. Yeah. I love that. I love that. I like DMV. That old Don Max Sturgeon I like. Mr. Crinkle is awesome. The Air's Getting Slippery is a funny little song, even if it's based off of a really stupid joke. And Hamburger Train, I will admit, tends to drag on perhaps a bit too long, but I love, again, the bass drums in that album sound awesome. And it's just a very solid album, even if it tends to meander a bit too much. When it gets good, it gets really good, and basically, even if it does meander too much, that's pretty much the main reason you want to hear Primus play. You just want to hear them jam. And pretty much they're that one-of-a-kind band that, once you hear them, you'll never mistake any other band for them. And another reason why Primus sucks. Okay, here we go. The top 10, my top 10 favorite albums in the 1990s. Number 10, The Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy, and The Infinite Sadness. This was a real tough choice to make, because it's either Melancholy or Siamese Dream. They're the only Smashing Pumpkins album I've heard, and the only ones I own. And it's really hard for me to choose between the two, because Siamese Dream is solid. It's a really consistent, really solid album. And Cherub Rock, has one of my all-time favorite intros to any song in general. I mean, Butch Vig's production of Siamese Dream can't be said enough. Because Siamese Dream's sound is great. I mean, it's like they took the shoegazing sound from bands like My Bloody Valentine and made it almost like Technicolor. It's like walls of sound, but instead of droning, it has them playing with an edge to it. But ultimately, Melancholy won out over Siamese Dream because of the fact that, well, I heard Melancholy first, and even though Melancholy tends to stumble a lot, especially in the second disc, the songs on Melancholy are just better, I guess. I mean, it's a very eclectic record, ranging from the quiet piano intro of the title track, to the orchestra of Tonight Tonight, to the heavy metal of Bullet with Butterfly Wings and Zero and Jelly Belly, to the soft quietness of To Forgive. Galapagos is one of my favorite tracks. Muzzle is really good. Take Me Down is a very nice, peaceful, mellow conclusion to the record. 1979 is another quiet little tune. In the Arms of Sleep is good. 33 is good. XYU and Tales of a Scorched Earth just go crazy with the heaviness quotient. And the final track, Farewell and Good Night, is probably one of the most... I can't even describe that last song. Farewell and Good Night is just... It's a lovely tune, that's all I can say. It's done like a lullaby, a little on the sad side, but just sounds great with the piano outro and everything. And the fact that it has all 4 band members singing, it just sounds great. And ultimately that's why Melancholy won out, because it's more epic, more eclectic, and, well, despite the fact there are a couple tracks on that album I don't like, its overall sheer ambition and taking the album forward as a whole surpasses Siamese Dream, but only by a little bit. Number 9, this one's going to shock people. Black Box Dreamland. Yes, I have Black Box Dreamland in my top 10 favorite albums in the 90s. A list that doesn't include any Nirvana. Sue me. This was probably the first album I remembered listening to when I was a kid that I legitimately liked. I'm not much of a... Well, I shouldn't say I'm much of an music fan, but when I was a kid, I used to like a lot of dance music, especially like disco from the 70s I liked when I was a kid, just because I considered them to be, well, fast tunes at the time. And Dreamland was... It's an album that came out in 1990, but obviously has a slight disco influence. And it's just a good song. I mean, Everybody was a great... Pardon me, Everybody was a great track. Strike It Up is a good tune. I even like the instrumental tracks. Like, there's 2 instrumental tracks in this dance album called... there's one called Dreamland, the title song, that's got this quiet synthesizer bit, and you hear like waves on the ocean, and then you hear what sounds like a soundtrack of children playing through a quiet beat. It's actually a really nice, peaceful tune. And then there's another instrumental called Ghost Box, which is that stereotypical smooth jazz song. At least that's what I call it. Because I've heard it on smooth jazz radio stations, I've heard it in doctors' waiting rooms. If you can find it, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. Just look up Black Box, Ghost Box. It's an instrumental track with a saxophone, and I bet you dollars you may have heard it somewhere. It's just an overall solid, fun dance album with some pretty damn good singing. That's really all I gotta say. I liked it when I was a kid. I still like it now. One of the few dance albums I find myself playing a lot. Number 8, Tool. Anima. At least I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not really sure. Tool's albums are always really good. They're probably one of the most consistently good bands in the history of ever. Even though they take forever to make an album, like their debut album, Undertow, came out in 93. Their EP, OPA, came out the year before that in 92. Anima took about 3 years to make in 1996. Then Lateralist took 5 years in 2001, and 10,000 Days took 5 years after that in 2006. And here we are 8 years after 10,000 Days, and we're still waiting on their next album. For my favorite Tool album, it's a close one between Lateralis and Anima, but Anima won out just because, well, I don't know, I just like Anima more. I think it's because it's slightly more direct than Lateralis is, because Tool are one of those bands that always had that balance between the like progressive rock side and their heavy metal side. Their first two albums, Undertow and Anima, seem to be more based on heavy metal, while their more recent records, Lateralis and 10,000 Days, were like more on the progressive side. And I liked Anima and Lateralis are my favorites because they sort of have that really nice balance of progressive rock artsiness and heavy metal awesomeness. But Anima went out slightly just because I think it's more direct, because Lateralis, as much as I like it, can take a while to get to the good parts. Still, I really like all four Tool albums a lot. But because Anima was made in the 90s, it gets the nod here. And still, where the hell is that follow-up to 10,000 Days, guys? It's been 8 years, come on. Number 7. They Might Be Giants, Apollo 18. They Might Be Giants are a band that I've always had a bit of admiration for. Like, I remember when I first heard them on my dad's Windows XP computer when they were featured as like part of this like Music Match jukebox setting on there or something like that. And then later on, a friend of mine got this album for his birthday. And then right after that, they did the Malcolm in the Middle theme song. And I found out they actually had hits in the early 90s with like Birdhouse in Your Soul and their really awesome cover of Istanbul Not Constantinople, both of which were off their album Flood. However, I always liked Apollo 18 over Flood because as much as I like Flood, that album got a little too silly in some parts. And don't get me wrong, They Might Be Giants are a band that's notorious for being really silly at times. And of course, there are plenty of silly moments on Apollo 18. But I like Apollo 18 because I just like the sound of it better. As much as I like Flood, Flood at times also sounded a little too polished, while Apollo 18 just sounds great. Like, I love how the keyboards sound on the album, and a lot of the songwriting on it's really good and catchy too. I mean, there's the guitar, which is one of the goofiest songs you'll ever hear. They even featured in a car commercial I remember a couple of years ago, which surprised the hell out of me, albeit pleasantly, so. There's I Palindrome I, which you will have stuck in your head. My Evil Twin is a song I remember my friend used to play a lot when I was by his house. Dinner Bell is awesome. It's like their own version of a barbershop quartet song sung from the point of view of a dog, I think. Narrow Your Eyes is like their tribute to the Beatles. Hall of Heads is a sort of like a creepy Halloween type song. And if you call yourself a They Might Be Giants fan and have not heard the Fingertips tracks or Spider, do yourself a favor and listen to them now. Those two songs, or 22 songs for that matter, are awesome. I love Apollo 18. I just love the artwork. I love the sound. The songwriting's good. It's one of my favorites. Number 6, the Dixie Chicks, Wide Open Spaces. I had to have at least one country album from the 90s on here too, because I grew up listening to the country music from that era. Ultimately, the Dixie Chicks went out just because I remember so many songs off this album. And most of the songs, were pretty good. I Can Love You Better Than That I liked. The title song Wide Open Spaces is okay. Loving Arms is alright. There's Your Trouble I really like. You Were Mine is that classic tearjerker song about a family falling apart. Never Say Die is alright. The Heartaches on Me, my mom played the crap out of that song when I was little. Let Her Rip is another nice energetic tune. I'll Take Care of You is really good. I love the chorus on there. And I'm the Only One Who Felt This Way is definitely one of my all-time favorite country songs, just in general. It's a really solid album that's country music that might have a slight pop influence, but I'm not talking about like the Shania Twain type pop. I mean, it has a pop influence, but only in the songwriting. And the way the music sounds in and of itself, it has a slightly folky alternative country influence to it, and in a really good way. It's just a solid record from my youth that my mother played the crap out of, and I remember enjoying it as a kid, and I still really enjoy it now. It's by far one of the few Dixie Chicks albums I actually found myself consistently playing a lot. Especially since I wasn't that much of a big fan of their later material. But again, that's me going off on another tangent. Okay, number 5. Weird Al Yankovic, Running with Scissors. There had to be a Weird Al album on any of my top 20 whatever albums list. I mean, he was the first artist I ever really got into as a kid. I mean, his albums may not have been the first albums I ever listened to. Like, the first real serious albums I can remember listening to were Black Box, Dreamland, like I mentioned earlier, Ricky Martin's self-titled album, NSYNC's No Strings Attached. But Weird Al was the first artist I liked more than one album by. Like, I loved his In 3D album from 1984. I loved A Bad Hair Day, which was my first Weird Al album I ever got. I loved, I liked Poodle Hats. Straight Outta Limbo was pretty good too. But Running with Scissors trumps them all. I remember playing the crap out of this album when I was in 5th grade. Like, I used to rent my copy from the library and I would just play it over and over again. I loved The Saga Begins, which spoofs American Pie, which is, in my opinion, one of the best songs ever. And turns it into a song based off Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. That's a nostalgia bomb for me right there. Then there's My Baby's in Love with Eddie Vedder, which is a hilarious song, which when I first heard it as a kid, I had no idea who he was talking about or any of the jokes. But now that I'm older and know my 90s alternative rock history, it's fucking hilarious. Pretty Fly for a Rabbi is a good tune. It's a spoof of Pretty Fly for a White Guy from The Offspring, and for a time it was my all-time favorite song. Like in 5th grade, I remember singing, "Oh, that's my all-time favorite song." Jerry Springer, a spoof of One Week by Bare Naked Ladies, another song I liked when I was a kid. I'm referring to 1 Week, though Jerry Springer I like too. Germs is a spoof of Nine Inch Nails, not directly spoofing the song, but just like spoofing the band and their style in general. Polka Power is an awesome polka medley from the late 90s. Your horoscope for today is this dig at 90s ska music that I love. That was another song that I absolutely loved when I was a kid, and I still do a lot. Definitely a fun song to sing along to. Truck Driving Song is a country song that starts off like, like the traditional stereotypical "I'm driving a truck, kind of a country song, until you start paying attention to the lyrics, as he mentioned that "my nipple rings don't bother me too much," and it turns out to be sung by a woman or possibly transsexual, which makes it very awkward. Then there is Grapefruit Diet, which is a spoof of Zoot Suit Riot, which was also the first ever Weird Al song I ever heard, because one of my relatives when I was little sent me a recorded tape, like she made her own tape, and all it had on that tape was Grapefruit Diet. So it was the first Weird Al song I ever heard. And of course the album ends with Albuquerque, an 11.5-minute epic that just has to be heard, because I can't describe it. If I did, it wouldn't be able to do it justice. Number 4. Faith No More, Angel Dust. I love Faith No More. They do not get any... They deserve so much more credit than they get. I mean, they don't get any credit at all. And when they do, it's just they mention the song Epic and that's it. They never mention anything else. They never mention Falling to Pieces, which was an excellent follow-up single that sadly never got the due it deserved. They never mention Midlife Crisis, which is on this album. They barely mention anything from their later years. Like, King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime, while it wasn't as good as Angel Dust, it was still damn good. And even their last album, Album of the Year, while it might be one of their weakest albums for the Mike Patton era, it still is damn solid and underrated. I mean, this is a band that was a huge influence over the alternative metal scene, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad. But they deserve so much more credit than they get, and Angel Dust is a really solid album. I understand why it wasn't a huge seller compared to the real thing, especially since there are some really, heavy screaming moments, like on Smaller and Smaller, and Malpractice, and Jizzlobber. Yeah, that song will get radio airplay. But there's so many good moments, too. Midlife Crisis, Land of Sunshine... Caffeine's a great track. RV is hilarious. Everything is Ruined is a song that should have been a bigger hit than it was. Kindergarten's good. Be Aggressive, one of the few times you'll hear a heavy metal song that's directly referencing gay fellatio. A Small Victory is awesome too. Crack Hitler is awesome music. I mean, that's one of those songs that I always imagine hearing that song in some sort of action movie sequence. Angel Dust is just a great album. That's all it's just wonderful. Pick it up if you haven't heard it. Number 3, R.E.M. Automatic for the People. Most people would probably mention Out of Time as being their favorite R.E.M. album from the 90s, but that's one of those albums I think that's really overrated. Don't get me wrong, Losing My Religion is an awesome song. Shiny Happy People is a guilty pleasure of mine. Your Wild Heaven's also pretty good too, but the rest of the album isn't that great. Automatic for the People, on the other hand, is all awesome. It's probably one of the saddest albums ever recorded. It's sort of like R.E.M's take on, like, Southern Gothic folk type music, but it's all really good. I mean, Drive is a great tune. Try Not to Breathe is good, as depressing as it is. Silent Wonder Sleeps Tonight is a song everybody knows. Everybody Hurts is a song that everybody knows. New Orleans Instrumental #1 is really nice. Sweetness Follows is one of my all-time favorites from that album. I love the mandolin part in Monty Got a Raw Deal. Ignore Land's like the only real rock and political song on the whole record. Start Me Kitten is a bizarro song that's sort of ethereal. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And Man on the Moon, of course, is the classic R.E.M. song that everybody knows. Night Swimming has a wonderful orchestra and piano part to it. I mean, the album may be depressing as hell, but it's so good. It's one of those albums that, for as sad as it gets, it never totally sinks into despair. And ultimately, the album does sort of have a happy ending with the final track, Find the River. It's just a wonderful record and hits you emotionally directly in the gut. The songwriting is strong and just... if you haven't cried at least once or twice listening to this album, you have no soul. Number 2. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Californication. I like the Chili Peppers a lot. I've listened to all their albums from Blood Sugar Sex Magic to their current one, I'm With You. The only album from the 80s that I've heard of theirs is Uplift Mofo Party Plan. And while that album is good, it came down to Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Californication, or By the Way. And ultimately, Californication went out because as much as I like By the Way, as much as I like it, is it's one of those albums that, as much as I like it, it doesn't really feel that much like a Chili Peppers record at times. And that there aren't that many real... I don't want to say there aren't that many real upbeat songs, but there's very few, if any, funky songs on the record, which is what I felt was sorely lacking from it. Californication has a lot of funk, but also has a lot of strong songwriting. And even though the title song, and Scar Tissue and Other Side all get really overplayed, there's a ton of other great tunes on here. Around the World is great. Parallel Universe is one of my favorites. Easily is okay. I like the real mellow, quiet, almost lullaby-like quality of the track Porcelain. This Velvet Glove is alright. Road Trippin' is a great tune too. I just love the album. I love the whole summery feel of it and the fact that, I don't know, there's just something about that album that's missing on other Chili Peppers albums. Like, it's a certain quality to it, and I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's because of the fact that it's the album that saw the group, returning after the fact they almost broke up the year before. I don't know, it's just a really, really solid album. And now, number 1, my number 1 album from the 1990s is Alice in Chains' Jar of Flies. It had to be an Alice in Chains album for me at number 1. They're probably one of my top 5 favorite bands ever. And it was really difficult because Jar of Flies is technically an EP, so technically it's not a real album. But I actually said, you know what, screw it, it's going on the list number 1. Though if I had to choose from Alice in Chains' 3 studio albums they did for the 1990s, the full-length ones, my favorite would actually probably have to be Tripod, the one with the dog on the cover. However, I like Jar of Flies over that just because it's a short album, barely a half hour long, just 7 songs, all predominantly acoustic, and yet it's all wonderful. For as sad and depressing as they get, they're all honest and darkly beautiful and just awesome to listen to. I mean, Rotten Apple features some really good emotional guitar work from Jerry Cantrell. Nutshell is just wonderful, one of the quintessential Alice in Chains tracks, despite the fact that it wasn't a big hit. There's also I Stay Away, which is awesome. Features an orchestra and one of the few electrically driven songs in there. No Excuses, one of the few happy songs, or happier songs on the album. Wailing Wasp is a gorgeous, if painful, instrumental. Don't Follow features some great singing. I love the harmonica feel to it. Like, whenever I hear that song, Don't Follow, I always imagine it being sung by the band at, like, a campfire outside or something like that. And the final song, Swing on This, is sort of like a swing, jazzy type tune, That's one of the few songs that has Alice in Chains actually having fun and, just joking around. Jar of Flies is just a wonderful album. And I still can't believe they wrote and recorded that album all in 1 week. Like they worked on a song a day. That still blows my mind because the album is so good. I mean, it's definitely one of Alice in Chains' quintessential releases, like a must-buy. Even if it's not a full-fledged album, buy it. It's that damn good. As much as I like Dirt, and like I said, I like their self-titled album, I like Sap, I really like all the stuff they've done. Jar of Flies is still my all-time favorite, and I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. Well, that's it. My top 20 favorite albums in the 1990s. If you're still listening, I'm sorry if I pissed you off. And that's all for now. Hope you guys liked the list, and voice your opinions, questions, comments below. And I hope to God that the sound quality of this doesn't suck. And I apologize if my voice sucks too, because I got some kind of cold or stuffy nose or something like that right now. What can you do? It's spring. Okay, this is David signing out, and hopefully I'll make a review like this soon. I hope.